Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Living Show on WMNF Tampa, where every Monday at 11 we bring you a conversation with local experts on sustainable issues. Your host today is myself, Tanya Vidovic, and Grace Banke. Answering your calls is Clark, and working the boards is Mr. Grace. Want to beautify your yard and see butterflies? Confused on what to plant? Stick around for the next hour as we talk about butterfly gardening.
Today's guest is Anita Camacho, a Florida native to the Tampa Bay area and president and founder of the Tampa Bay Butterfly Foundation, Incorporated, and the National American Butterfly Association Tampa Bay chapter. In April, she began operating Little Red Wagon Native Nursery in South Tampa, which is currently the only native plant nursery in Hillsborough County. Anita offers education, outreach, and butterfly talks for numerous groups of all ages around Florida and internationally to raise awareness of the plight of our environment that starts with plants and insects. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you.
You have a really extensive gardening and conservation background. Can you just tell us a little bit about your personal history and how you got into gardening and specifically butterfly gardening?
Well, I've always been a nature girl, and right from the beginning, my parents, or my mother and my grandmother, had me out in the yard and helping out with gardening. So it was one of those things that it just started early on in life, and I've always been someone to be outside and enjoy nature. So over the years, more and more time was spent doing butterfly gardening in conjunction with rose gardening. But they were kept in separate parts of my yard, and then eventually they've now merged to where everything is together. So it's kind of been an evolution over time, just something that I've become interested in from the time I was a kid, and now honing in on working focus on the butterfly species and insect world.
So when I was reading over your bio, I came across the word lepidopterist, and I had never heard of it before, and I now love that word. It's now one of my favorite words. Could you explain to our listeners what exactly a lepidopterist is?
Well, lepidopterist is someone who studies butterflies and also moths, and that is something that I've put a lot of time and energy in over the past several years. So that's essentially what it is.
So you mentioned butterflies and moths, and that's actually a question that I had and a question that my 8-year-old had. What is the difference between butterflies and moths?
Well, the difference predominantly, most butterflies are solar powered. They're daytime flyers, and many of the moth species are nocturnal. There are some that are diurnal and some that are day flying moths, but for the most part, the majority of moth species are nighttime pollinators. And there's a few different differences between them. Moths are going to have more of a plume type antenna, whereas butterflies are going to have more of clubs on the end of their antennas, and they're not fuzzy antennas. Moths, when they land, are going to land flat with their wings, versus butterflies, when they land, if they're not warming their wings, are going to have their wings folded. So there's a few differences between them, and those are the bigger ones.
I think we may have lost Tanya a little bit. She's on the top of a mountain somewhere. Are you there, Tanya? She really is on the top of a mountain, guys.
No, I'm sorry. I am. Thank you for allowing me to do the show while I'm on the top of the mountain. No, I thought you were going to do a reintroduction of the show. Sorry about that. So you're listening to the Sustainable Living Show here on WMNF Tampa. Today we are talking about butterflies and butterfly gardening. So our guest today is Anita Camacho, and she is the local expert on butterfly gardening. Now, Anita, before we get into any more details, can you kind of explain what is butterfly gardening?
Well, butterfly gardening is focusing on putting in host plants and nectar resources. The host plants are what attract the butterflies to lay eggs and continue to, work on their species and build their population. So putting in the host plants is really critical for continuing their population. And nectar resources is what the adults are going to use for drinking nectar, because adults don't have mouth parts. They use a proboscis to drink nectar. So having a combination of those two will keep the butterflies flying in and around your garden.
Okay, and so when you say a host plant and a nectar plant, what does that mean?
So host plant is what the female butterflies are going to lay eggs on. That's what the caterpillars will eat as a food source during the caterpillar phase of metamorphosis. So that's what a host plant is. Nectar is what the adult butterflies will drink nectar from, the flowering plants. and both are equally as important to the population of butterflies. So they need both things, and that's what you will want to plant in your garden, to have that combination so that it keeps the butterflies coming back.
And when you say a host plant and a nectar plant, when you're trying to visualize a butterfly garden, what does one look like typically?
Well, it really depends. Everybody's got different ideas about how to incorporate that into their landscapes. Doesn't have to look like the Everglades like some might think, but what my garden is a little bit messy. I'll call it more edgy, not so much Everglades like I was talking about, but the butterfly garden section is a little bit more wild looking and less manicured. But there's a lot of people that have incorporated butterfly plants into their landscapes, and they keep things in a manicured way that makes it more appealing for themselves. Butterflies really don't care. They're just looking for their food sources. So as long as that's there for them, they're typically going to be happy.
And I want to remind our listeners that you're listening to the Sustainable Living Show here on WMNF Tampa. Today, we are talking about Florida butterfly gardening with Anita Camacho. If you have any questions, give us a call at 813-239-9663, and we can answer all of your butterfly questions, or you can email us at dj@wmnf.org.
So, Anita, how much space do you need to have a butterfly garden?
Well, you don't need a lot of space, and that's one of the beauties of it. And some people are, living in a condo or a high-rise apartment or something like that, and as long as it's not a screen enclosure, you can put essentially a milkweed and a nectar, which is a host plant for monarchs, and a nectar resource like tropical sage in the same pot, and that's butterfly garden in a pot. You'll attract predominantly a monarch with that, potentially queen butterflies in our area. But you don't really need a ton of space to accomplish it. Every little bit of space that you plant something for their benefit matters, essentially. So in creating corridors, bigger gardens is great, but just creating small little corridors, even if everybody just planted a few plants in their yard, it would make a big difference as long as they're not being treated with chemicals like pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers.
So you mentioned monarchs, which I feel like are probably the most, well-known butterfly that people talk about a lot. What other butterflies are there that would be attracted to a butterfly garden around here in Florida?
Well, in Florida, we have over 200 species that migrate through here. About 160 species in Florida are breeding here. And I would say in our Hillsborough County, the Tri-County area, we have about 125 that are breeding in our area. So there's a lot of different options for attracting various butterflies to a butterfly garden. Some butterflies are going to want to stay more in a sort of a wooded area, so it depends on where your landscapes are and where the homes are. But monarchs are very easy to attract. They are the charismatic, kind of the poster child for butterflies, so they are one of the easier to attract to a garden. Essentially, you just plant milkweed and a nectar plant, and you're off and running, and they'll show up, and they'll pretty much eat the milkweed right up. Other ones would be you could plant the pipevine and attract both a pipevine swallowtail and a polydamas swallowtail. That's two of our black swallowtails in the area. And or you can plant some herbs, things like dill, fennel, parsley attract the black swallowtail. So if you want to share your herbs, that's something that you might bring in. So there's just a whole lot of different species that can be brought in. There's a lot of native plants which is what the butterflies evolved with, that are really important. And unfortunately, they have kind of a bad marketing scheme because most of the plants have the name weed or the word weed in them, like milkweed, but we love the monarch, so we don't mind that we're planting milkweed for monarchs. But a lot of the other plants have the word weed in it, so it gives it kind of a bad rap and thinking, well, this is a weed, I don't want it in my garden. But then when I think a lot of our customers start to realize what they attract and the butterflies that it brings in, they sort of get over that word weed really quickly and enjoy it. And a lot of these plants are even edible for humans. So it's kind of a win-win.
So we have a listener email. Bubba wants to know, have we lost any butterfly species in Florida due to climate change?
I would say it's climate change is one of the factors. The biggest factor probably for us is habitat loss and hurricanes. At this point, there's a few species that have dropped off, but there's a lot of the species imperiled species that are being worked on by a specific group. that focus on the imperiled butterflies, and some of them they've had some pretty good success with the Schlauss swallowtail, for example, down in South Florida, as well as the Atala. So those populations have made nice improvements. So I think there's a lot of effort being put into refocusing energies on habitats and bringing those butterflies back. So, but we're going to continue to work on those and not have any others go extinct if we can help it. That's the big goal.
So we've got a caller, but before I bring Amy on, I want to remind everybody you're listening to the Sustainable Living Show here on WMNF Tampa, and we're talking butterfly gardens today with our expert, Anita Camacho. If you want to give us a call and ask a question on air, you can call 813-239-9663, or you can email me here at dj@wmnf.org. And I'm going to bring Amy on from St. Pete. Amy, are you there?
Yes, thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
And thank you for the show. I just wanted to say that my Chaya tree, Chaya, not chia, it's Chaya. My Chaya tree draws 5 or 6 different varieties of butterflies. There's never a point that I don't have butterflies in my backyard. You go there anytime, and they love this tree. It's also called the spinach tree, and you can eat the leaves, but you have to boil it. It would be toxic if you didn't boil the leaves. But the butterflies love those little white blossoms that come out. And not so much the monarch, of course, because the monarch goes for the milkweed. But the Chaya tree draws the swallowtails, the big yellow and black, or black and yellow, either way. I just wanted to say that tree is great for that.
Anita, do you have anything to say about the Chaya?
Well, that is a plant I'm familiar with. It is a non-native plant to Florida, but it is a nectar source that butterflies have become very attracted to. So it is one of those that brings in quite a few feeders for nectar.
It's not an invasive tree. It doesn't just pop up all over the yard. It stays where it's at, and it's kind of a junk tree. It'll break and stuff like that. It's kind of that way, but you can actually root it if you get a branch. I think you can root it, but you can just plant another one. It grows into a little bonsai. It looks like a bonsai almost, but mine's like 10 feet tall now, and it's canopy out. Put the bird bath underneath it. It's so perfect for the birds to land on it and go to the bird bath. But the number of butterflies, it highly outweighs, whether it's native or non-native. They just love it.
Thank you so much, Amy. It was nice to hear from you.
I noticed that too, as far as the butterflies really liking that spiny Chaya. The zebra longwings are always all over it. So when we talk about monarch butterflies, and you say that there's 200 species of butterflies that pass through the Tampa Bay area, how many butterflies, different types of butterflies, will actually show up, like in somebody's yard if they plant it? Do they have to plant different plants to get different types of butterflies?
Well, to have butterflies stay, as I mentioned earlier, you need to have host and nectar plants. I would say at least 50 of the 125 that are in the Bay Area are butterflies you could attract to your garden if you plant the right host plants and you have various nectar resources. And that's kind of a real important thing, too, because not all nectar is created equally. And while, yes, the spinach tree will attract certain butterflies, a lot of the bigger butterflies like that one because the nectar is accessible for their shorter proboscis. The smaller butterflies, a lot of them actually have a longer proboscis, and they like tubular flowers, things like coral honeysuckle or tropical sage, some of those kind of plants. So having a palette of different nectar sources is really important, and that brings in a whole lot more feeders as well as bees as well, different bees. We have 350 species of bees in the state, so of wild bees. So wow. It's just having really having just a really big palette. And it's like, similar to us. We don't like to eat the same meal every single meal of the day, every day of the week. We like to have variety. And the more variety you have in nectar resources and colors, the spectrum of colors, the more visitors you're going to have.
And so you mentioned not to use herbicides and pesticides, but I always get really confused when I go to some of the nurseries and stores where they're selling butterfly plants, and then it says that it's treated with the neonicotinoids.
Right.
So why would they treat a butterfly plant with neonicotinoids, and is that harmful to the pollinators?
Oh, it's definitely harmful. And they're finding that chemical actually stays in the root systems and soils now up to over 500 days. So it's not something that goes away quickly. And what it does is it's systemic and it gets into the plants. And once it's in the stems of the plants, the caterpillars eat it and pretty much it will kill them. So it's really kind of counterproductive to have butterfly host plants being treated with this chemical. I think some of the growers are starting to feel the pressure to stop doing that, especially from gardeners getting so upset and returning plants. Their caterpillars have been dying and trying so hard to do some good for the world and for the butterfly species, only to have these things happen. So it has been disappointing that has been happening. That's one of the things we focus on here at Little Red Wagon Native Nursery is no chemicals at all. So we're just focused on what needs to be here in Florida. The plants evolved here in our sandy soil, so there's just nothing fancy that has to be done to plant these plants. And it's just a lot safer for us without the chemicals, let alone the insect species. So everything just works together. And when you stop using those toxic pesticides, you start to notice, the ecosystem come into balance, which is really fun to see and sometimes upsetting for some people. But you kind of start to see this balance happening where the predators come in and take care of some of the pests and everything just sort of works together as it's intended.
So it sounds like it's pretty important when you are looking to start a butterfly garden to make sure that it is pesticide and herbicide free. And for somebody who's just getting into starting a butterfly garden, is it the same as vegetable gardening when there's a certain time of the year, or is there a good time to start a butterfly garden?
Well, it depends on the species. There are some species that have, so like swallowtails are going to be flying predominantly from May to September. So they have sort of a season themselves. Monarchs here in Florida, we have a year-round population. We do have some of the migration that comes through the Bay Area, but most of the migration typically occurs north of us. But we do get some of the migration down here. And in the fall, they're not laying eggs if they're migrating monarchs. So it's not something that we need to provide host plants for. But we do have a native milkweed that evolved here many, many years ago, well before the non-native tropical milkweed was so widely available in nurseries, that has grown here and evolved with the monarchs. That is an evergreen and it grows all year. So that is what the monarchs, the resident monarchs, evolved with in Florida, and that's called Asclepias perennis, and otherwise known as aquatic milkweed. And that's a plant that can bloom any time of the year.
That's interesting. That I would like to reintroduce the show for 1 second, but I want you to go into the monarchs that stay here and the monarchs that travel and how far they travel. You're listening to the Sustainable Living Show here on WMNF Tampa. Today we are talking with Anita Camacho about Florida butterfly gardening. If you have any questions, give us a call at 813-239-9663 or email us at dj@wmnf.org.
Anita, before you get into Tanya's questions about the monarchs, it turns out we have many, many butterfly lovers with many butterfly questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So we're going to go to Haley in Clearwater here on the phone. Haley, are you there?
I'm there. Hi.
Hi, welcome.
Hi. Thank you. This could not come at a more perfect time because this morning we had 3 orange-barred sulfurs emerge in our little enclosure that we have, and we have a cassia tree. So I was just kind of wondering, obviously we're not trying to keep them all and, enclose and emerge all of them, but just a few for my 5-year-old to just kind of learn the process and everything. So I was just wondering if there's a good way to help them along, while they are in our enclosure, and if there's anything specific we should be doing.
I'm having a hard time hearing all that. I did hear she's got orange-barred sulfurs in it.
Sorry, my baby was crying.
Oh, no, that's okay. She's asking, she has some that have metamorphosized and emerged in an enclosure, and she's wondering, before they set them free, are there things that they should be doing for them?
No, butterflies like to be wild. That's kind of what they're accustomed to. So there's nothing that needs to be done. They pretty much are self-sufficient if given the proper host plants and nectar plants. As I mentioned earlier, they know exactly what they need to do.
Does that answer your question, Haley?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for calling in. So we have another email question that is similar to that. So a woman emailed in and said, my daughter has gotten into gardening. She has milkweed and a few other native butterfly plants. She has caterpillars now and loves it. Ducks from the lake come up every now and then and clean them out. Her other caterpillar predators seem to be wasps. I'm sure that the wasps probably want to put them in their nests paralyzed for their larvae. I told her she may need to raise the pots to keep them away from the ducks, and she's not sure what to do about the parasitic wasps.
Well, wasps are one of the predators, and I know it's a challenge in nature because nature has a very cruel side of it, of course, and it is hard to watch these things. But one of the things about caterpillars, they're a massive food source for a lot of other things. Essentially, this is part of our focus also is they're part of the bottom of the food chain, and if the bottom of the food chain is healthy, the rest of the food chain is healthy. And that's really what we're focusing on. And one of the things, as hard as it is to hear, that wasps are important for is managing population control, and because of that, they reduce disease. So they're feeding their babies basically dead caterpillars, and that is just an unfortunate part of it. And it is hard to watch, so I don't watch it myself. But one of the things here, especially with the nursery and so many host plants, is they kind of help keep things under control here as well. And we've always got a ton of butterflies flying around every single day. So with every monarch female laying about 300 to 400 eggs, only 2 to 8 of those are supposed to make it to adulthood. As unusual as that might sound, that's very common in the insect order, to lay a lot of eggs just so that their population can continue. And a lot of the creatures that come out of those eggs are food for other things. So it is pretty common, and is part of, that's when I talk about how the ecosystem kind of comes into balance. They are one of the balancing creatures to make that happen.
Another listener says that they've planted crown milkweed and released up to 200 monarchs annually for the past few years. She said that she's found scarlet milkweed not to be as successful for monarchs compared to the crown variety. She wants to know, is it her or is it the plant?
Well, I'm not familiar with the crown milkweed. It's easier if we know what the scientific name is. Mm-hmm. The scarlet milkweed, I've heard that called, it's one of the many names for what is known as tropical milkweed as well, Asclepias carasabica. That is a Mexican non-native milkweed that has been tested repeatedly as being a plant that isn't as good for our monarchs here in Florida. It produces a lot of spores that has been increasing the rate of OE disease in monarchs, and so it's been a really big challenge for our resident population, as well as now starting to spread to the migrating population as well. So crown milkweed, I'd have to know what the scientific name is. That one is not one I've heard of before.
Okay. And another listener, kind of in the same vein, has read that non-native large-flowered pipevine is too toxic for the swallowtail caterpillars, and they've also heard that the non-native milkweed is not good for the monarchs. You just talk about the milkweed. Could you expand a little bit on if you know anything about the non-native pipevine?
Yeah, I will get to the non-native pipevine. So I did Google the crown milkweed. What that is an African milkweed. It's a large flower with a purple flower. It grows basically, I've seen it in Africa, all along the Indian Ocean. It grows as big as oak trees there. Mm-hmm. I know that some breeders use.
Yes. Are you there? Are you there, Anita? We seem to have lost you.
They haven't tested yet. But regarding...
Oh,
sorry?
That's okay. We just lost you for a minute there, Anita.
Oh, you got me back?
Yes, we got you back now. We lost you right at about when you were talking about how it grows as big as oak trees in Africa.
Yeah, it's a pretty big plant. The seed pods are the size of mangoes. It's amazing. Their milkweed butterfly there just isn't as prolific in species count as our monarchs are, so there's really very little eating it, unfortunately. I would have loved to have brought it back, but there just hasn't been as much testing on that milkweed as far as whether it's beneficial or not beneficial, if there's any issues with it. I know a lot of the breeders with International Butterfly Breeders Association use that because it does fill the monarchs up pretty well. I think as, based on the little bit of information we do know about it, it's probably a better option than the tropical milkweed, the Asclepias curassavica, that's been sold pretty readily. But there's just a little bit more research, or at least some research that needs to be done on that plant, I think, and how it's affecting monarchs one way or the other.
So I want to remind our listeners. Oh, sorry, Anita. Let me just reintroduce real quick.
Yep.
You're listening to the Sustainable Living Show here on WMNF Tampa. Our expert today is Anita Camacho, who knows all things butterflies and butterfly gardening. If you have a question, you can call us at 813-239-9663, or you can email us at dj@wnf.org. Go ahead, Anita.
So I think the other question was regarding the toxicity of the non-native pipevine, and that is correct. It is toxic to the pipevine swallowtail. However, the Polydamas swallowtail is able to use it as its host plant. But if the pipevine swallowtail lays eggs on it, and the caterpillars typically cannot handle the toxicity level of that plant, and it usually will kill the caterpillars. So the native pipevine is much better for our pipevine swallowtails.
So we've got another caller who has a question for you. We're going to take Clay from Land O'Lakes. Clay, are you there?
Greetings. Yes, I am. And thank you for taking my call. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the show. And thank you all for volunteering. I have a number of things, but first, I have two questions, but I want to first quantify them. I have a little under 5 acres. It's been deemed certified wildlife habitat. I let all the native species grow. I don't mow. I cull things every now and then. I have a huge amount of moths and butterflies, which I've tried to document for some time. But I got a list from, I think it was a Native Plant Society of to help me identify the different species of butterflies and moths. But there is not 200 of them on there. So one of my first questions is, where would I get something that allowed me to actually be able to identify those 200 species that you say visit through Florida?
As far as a resource, a book or something like that?
Yeah, where was it? Like, the Native Plant Society gave out a guide. It's a fold-out guide. It has probably 50 to 60 butterflies and moths on it, but it's nowhere near as the 200 you say visit Florida. So, and I've been unable to find some of them in the guide they provided, so I know I have things visiting I can't identify because I don't know what they are. I don't have a mechanism to do that. Is there a guide that allows covers those 200 species to visit Florida?
If there's one, I'm not sure if there's one that covers all the species. I know I have a list of the species in Hillsborough County and our neighboring counties that I could provide. There's also Florida butterfly. There's some Florida butterfly books that you can get online. I know by Dr. Minnow. One of the other ones is Butterflies Through Binoculars by Jeffrey Glassberg. Those are a couple of good ones. So there are some resources that you can get online. I know Amazon pretty much sells a lot of these books.
Unfortunately, since the pandemic came about, I don't have access to the internet until the libraries reopen. But moving on,
if you can also call me at the nursery, and I can get your email address and send you a list.
I'm sorry?
If you want to call me at the nursery, I can also send you a list of the butterflies via email.
Okay, that'd be cool. So, like I said, moving on to neonicotinoids, they're a neurotoxin. They're a horrible thing, especially for our pollinators, and most of Europe has banned them. And only in the United States, where money is more important than our future, do we still serve them up. So, the next question is that I have is, with all the butterflies I have, I'm growing lots of vegetables and fruit trees and all that stuff. What do I do to keep the caterpillar? I don't want to kill them if I don't have to, but how do I keep the caterpillars off my food-producing plants? What's the best way to accomplish that without, killing them?
Well, if it's fruit trees similar like citrus trees, the giant swallowtails are going to be using that as their host plant.
I think
as long as there's enough food for everybody, but the only other option is to have a different plant for them and move the caterpillars to it if you're trying not to kill them, and give them another host plant that they can eat that isn't bothering your trees. But typically they don't kill
planting
plants.
a host plant that they
just
love
trim them
next
really
to
well.
the plants that I'm growing might be effective in keeping them from eating on my vegetables, my tomato plants and my all my different pepper plants and all that kind of stuff.
I'm having a hard time hearing.
It's okay. I think we have a lot of callers on the line. So Clay, I'm going to let Anita answer your question. So thank you for calling in. I'm going to let Anita answer your question so that we can keep everybody on the line who's trying to be here. What you're trying to say, Anita, was that if you have enough plants, then you will have enough for you to eat and enough for the butterflies, right? And enough for the caterpillars.
I think that's the case. Typically, butterfly caterpillars are not going to kill a plant. They're going to trim it back really well, which actually encourages the plant to grow. But unfortunately, sometimes that impedes, different times of the year, it can impede the growth of fruit-producing plants. So what I suggest is planting different things you can move them to. Even here at the nursery, obviously, I've got a lot of inventory where we're trying to sell host plants, and it's really difficult to sell a plant that just, looks like a stick. So we're moving caterpillars pretty regularly to plants that I have decided they could have to eat. And so it's kind of a balance, and it's time consuming. So at home, I just let whatever happens happen, because that's a garden where I figure that they're all supposed to, be enjoying. So if there's something left for me, I guess it's a good thing.
Yes. So I'm going to remind everybody you're listening to the Sustainable Living Show on WMNF Tampa, and we're talking to Anita Camacho about butterfly gardening today. If you have a question for her, you can call us at 813-239-9663, or you can email us at dj@wmnf.org. We actually have another little brief guest here. This is Gary from Folly Farms. He's calling to talk about the butterfly garden over at Folly Farms. Are you there, Gary?
Yes, I am.
Thanks so much for your patience.
Sure. Hi, Anita.
Hey there.
Good to hear your voice. Hey, I'm here with Leslie and Chris, too. We're all from Folly Farm Nature Preserve, and as Anita knows, she's been out visiting us. We've been hard at work for the last over a year, up to 2 years, putting butterfly gardens in at Folly, and really, when I heard about this show, I was excited to call in and, first of all, to listen to Anita and listen to her advice, and then to invite everybody out to Folly.
Yeah, that's great. So how can they figure out things about Folly Farm and how to get there and what you're doing?
Well, they can go on our website, and actually the Safety Harbor Garden Club Facebook page is probably a really good place to get to Folly Farm information. There's also a Folly Farm Nature Preserve Facebook page as well that you can get to. As far as in Safety Harbor, we're on Martin Luther King, just east of McMullen Booth. But that address will be in the on Facebook page.
Great. Well, thank you so much for calling in. Sure. I've been over there to Folly Farms, and you guys have an amazing thing going on there. Lots of edibles and fruit trees, and I think I've actually released butterflies there when you guys first opened.
Yeah, we have people that that's kind of a regular occurrence out there now. And just one quick note was we spotted some malachite butterflies in the garden. It was a little over a month ago, and I think it was Leslie that spotted them, and she goes, "Ah, Gary!" So we went over, and sure enough, we had a malachite, and then we had folks come out there, and one.
Oh, and I feel like we have just lost Gary from Folly Farms. Anita, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Lots of call dropping today. Well, we're going to take another call. We still have more. So here is David from Sarasota. David, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Welcome, David.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I'm a small-time landscaper in Sarasota, Florida, and I've been sneaking in butterfly plants for my customers because they really don't, know about butterflies or care about them. But when they finally discover that their yard is full of them, that they really take notice. And it's so simple, and it's very. And I wanted to say something about Asclepias curassavica, the Mexican milkweed.
Mm-hmm.
I read something that said that that the toxicity of it was something very important for certain species of monarch butterflies. That it actually they incorporate some of these toxins, and it repels mites. Apparently, mites are a problem with a lot of butterflies or other insects. In fact, I've seen some on beetles that really disturb me. But what I really wanted to say was that one of the really great plants, if you want to see helicoid butterflies, that's the zebra longwing, which is a black butterfly with yellow stripes. And they just sort of float in the air. They don't even seem to flap their wings hardly. They love the Florida or the African firebush. And it can grow very small, or it can grow up to about 15 feet tall, or maybe even larger. I really don't know, but that's about the ceiling, 15 feet. And they can be bee pollinated, or just about every insect I've ever seen has come to this plant. And they bloom practically year round. They do have a berry that's very, very attractive, but the flowers themselves apparently are very rich in nectar, and all the butterflies seem to come to them that I've seen.
Well, thank you so much for calling, David, and thanks for getting butterfly plants to your customers.
I just do it. You know, they want me to plant something, and they don't really know anything about plants, so that's a good way of getting the plants out there.
Absolutely.
We need.
Now, Anita, now that we're talking about, butterfly plants, do you have, what are your top butterfly plants that people should be planting in their yard?
Well, the one David just mentioned, firebush, is an excellent resource for nectar, as he mentioned. It also will attract the ruby-throated hummingbird, which is a hummingbird in our area because it's got a nice tubular flower. But that is a really nice magnet for pollinators. Yesterday at our nursery, we have one out the front of our nursery, and I think we had about 8 different butterflies all over it last evening. So it's one of those that brings in a lot, and it is a Florida native, and it's a gorgeous, bright orange, almost red kind of flower. It's a deep orange, and the berries are good for the birds. So it kind of covers a lot of territory. So that's a nice one to plant as far as bringing in quite a few species. So that's definitely on the favorite list. And the zebra longwing, as he was talking about, zebra heliconia is also, as it's known, is our state butterfly. And so one of my favorite plants, because I do love that butterfly as well, is a corky stem passion vine, which grows in the shade or in partial sun really nicely. It provides berries for birds. And the zebra longwing is a stunning butterfly, but it does like a little bit cooler temperatures, so it needs to be planted kind of in a shadier or partial shade condition to attract that butterfly. Similarly, another passion vine that's very popular is the maypop, the incarnata passion vine that's got a really big, bright purple flower. A lot of people like. It's a great nectar source with that big flower. It also can fruit, but it attracts the Gulf fritillary, which is also a beautiful orange butterfly with some black on it. And they're like the monarch, the caterpillars are very big eaters, so that vine can get very well trimmed very quickly. But those are a couple that are really nice to bring into the landscape. Pepperweed is a nice one. It's very easily grown here in Florida. You can get it on the side of the road, or you can get it from our nursery. But either way, it attracts and feeds the great southern white butterfly, as well as being an edible for us when the seeds are green. It has kind of a peppery taste, which also provide vitamin A and C for us. So it's kind of got a lot of purposes. And the great southern white butterfly is just gorgeous. So there's just a lot of different things that you can plant. It's super simple. The gardening's easy from the standpoint of you don't have to do much to the soil. I don't do anything to the soil. These plants all evolved in our Florida sandy soil, and that's what they're used to. So you don't fertilize native plants like you have to do with all these exotic plants. They're used to our soil. I throw a banana peel out a couple times a year in different parts of the yard, and that's pretty much all I do, and the plants do very well.
And we've got Gary back here from Folly Farms. Hi, Gary. Are you there? Sorry you got dropped.
No, that's okay. Hey, where did I leave off? Was I telling you about the malachite?
Yes.
Did I get all the way to the end?
I don't think you got all the way to the end.
All right. So right now we're just anxiously awaiting. We have a little butterfly house, and we've got the green shrimp host plant. We've got some wild petunia in there, and we're waiting for eggs or caterpillars. But right now, nothing's happening on that regard. But we have 5 flying around in our little butterfly house right now, which is pretty cool. And some painted ladies. So, let's see. Anyway, so one of the reasons I'm really excited to call in is that, we've gotten on different days, we'll get 24 species in a count over the course of a couple hours. And I know, Anita, you were out there a couple times and doing some counts out there. And I like Folly Farm for the fact that you can almost own the park when you get there. It's like very peaceful. You can exhale with the butterflies. But my question for Anita is, I know for us it was like the end of April, beginning of May is like when we had clouds of butterflies. I mean, that was like prime time. Are those the months or is there other months when butterflies are really around?
Well, that's a popular time for some of the first broods of certain species to get going, and their caterpillars are usually, the eggs are being laid sometime in March, maybe early April, so the adults appear during that time. So there is a large number of butterflies a lot of times during that time. We also, one of the times of years that we do the butterfly counts is in July for NABA as a national count month.
Right.
And typically the species are out. It's rainy season, which also brings out a lot more species because their host plants and the nectar plants are really blooming a lot more during that time and more mature. So it just depends on what species you're talking about. I know the day that I was out there for your festival, I think I had like 18 species that day, and I wasn't able to look for very long, but there are quite a few species based on all the things that you guys have been planting, which is wonderful. And the fact that you have some water area there, which, lends itself to an awful lot of other species that, you can attract as well, which is really neat.
Well, some people have asked me about the monarchs where it's like, and for us at Folly, it's like the milkweeds are coming back strong right now because we haven't seen a lot of monarchs right now. Is there a reason for that?
I think they go through phases, where they'll have a big brood, and there's kind of ups and downs, sort of lulls in their population as they're in Florida. They like a lot of humidity, so we had, I think it was Elsa that came through, so that kind of disturbed things and upset the balance for just a little bit. So there's a rebuild that happens after that, storms like that.
Gotcha.
But monarchs come and go all the time. I mean, we'll have a big flush of them, and then while I'll see them flying around, we don't have a lot of caterpillars for some period of time, and the next thing you know, we have a ton of caterpillars. So it really just comes and goes as far as how they're laying eggs. But in my experience here in Tampa, I've had, unless we get below 50 degrees for a long period of time, which doesn't happen too often, I pretty much have monarchs almost year-round in my garden.
Nice. Hey, you know what? We're really excited about getting over to your place in Tampa. Can't wait to see what you got going on over there.
Thanks so much for calling, Gary. And I want everybody to get out to Folly Farms and go see some butterflies.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, great. Have a great day. And I want to remind everybody you're listening to the Sustainable Living Show here on WMNF Tampa. We're talking butterfly gardens today with Anita Camacho. If you want to give us a call and ask a question, you can call at 813-239-9663 or email me at dj@wmnf.org. Really quick, we're going to go to Scott, who is part of the Sustainable Living team, who is going to let you know what sustainable events there are going on around town coming up. Scott, are you there?
Yeah. Hi. Thanks a lot. All right. This Wednesday, we got from 2 to 3 p.m., the Brooker Creek Preserve Environmental Education Center will be hosting a free online class about Pinellas' native orchids. For more information, go to their website, brookercreekpreserve.org. Also, this Wednesday, Burn Ocean Conservation is hosting water goat cleanups at Bartlett Park, Salt Creek, and Harborage Marina in St. Pete from 9 till 11 a.m. Saturday, August 14th, Salty Soul Foundation is hosting a beach cleanup at the Dunedin Causeway at 8 a.m. For more information, go to saltysoulfoundation.org or their Facebook page. Wednesday, August 25th from 6 to 8 p.m., the City of St. Petersburg is hosting an online event about drought-tolerant plants with the horticulturalist from the St. Petersburg Water Conservation Office. To find more information and to register, go to the City of St. Pete's webpage for water conservation workshops and resources, or check their Facebook page. Friday, September 3rd at 9 a.m., the Sarasota IFAS Extension Office will host a free online class about cool plants to attract butterflies and pollinators. For more information, contact Wilma Hawley at the Extension Office or find their Facebook page. That's all we got. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks so much for calling, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
So, Anita, we had an email question that I really wanted to get to, and it was, do butterflies need a water source, or do they get all of their hydration from nectar?
They do like a water source. They actually also like an area, especially for the males, that they can use for what is called puddling. And that gets them some salts and other minerals into their system for breeding. And an area where you might not have it mulched and it's kind of moist, especially in the morning when they do most of their puddling. So I typically have like a very shallow dish with some rocks in it. Even in my bird bath, I'll do something like that where I have a regular bird bath for the birds. I have another one that I use for the butterflies and the bees so they can all get drinks. And I put rocks in it so it's shallow and they're able to get water. So it is important for them to have a water source as well.
And that's helpful for bees as well, right?
Oh, yes. Lots of different insects will use those water sources. And I know that can be a concern with mosquitoes. You can just use the, mosquito dunks or the mosquito bits, which is the same thing as mosquito dunks, but smaller in bits. And you can put those in there and it won't hurt them. So that keeps those away.
We have another listener who's wondering if the milkweed bugs on their milkweed are harmful.
Well, they're not harmful to our environment or anything. What they do, the milkweed, is they suck some of the sap out of the newer growth. What they're really waiting for is the seed pods, because they really, really like the seed pods and to eat those. Sometimes you can have a really huge abundance of them and they can get so much of the sap that it really can damage the plant and needs to be trimmed back. But they're part of the milkweed ecosystem and they're pretty much always going to be there. They're very difficult to get rid of without harming other things. So it's one of those things that I've just kind of grown to live with. And I find that leaving them alone, something else must be getting them, because we don't have a huge population of them here at the nursery.
So I know that I have before, and I know a lot of other people who bring caterpillars in to watch them go through their metamorphosis and emerge and things like that. And I was told that you could bring them in to protect them, from parasitic wasps and other predators like that. Is that something we should do, or should we just let the process kind of happen on its own outside?
Well, metamorphosis is really fascinating, and I think from an education standpoint, it's fun to do as an activity, on a small basis. If you're going to start doing it on a large scale where people get into the 30s, 40s, and 100s, there's just a lot more to it to make sure that you're actually contributing to conservation in some way, and maybe reporting results and information to citizen science like Monarch Watch or Journey North. At that point, it would be better if you're going to raise that number of butterflies to be producing information for these groups, and also learning more about how to best prevent disease and how many should be in a habitat. There is quite a lot of information out there with different groups that train people and provide classes on these things, because it can introduce a lot of disease to the butterflies. And really, they need 70 to 80% humidity, so they really shouldn't be brought into a home where air conditioning exists, because that's taking humidity out of the air, which really is very unhealthy for butterfly species. So ideally on a porch, if you're going to do that, it would be ideal to do on a porch or outside in the shade. Is more beneficial. There is some evidence that, it can turn them around and not help them with migration, things like that, if it happened to be a migrating butterfly.
So I've been to your nursery, and my kids and I really enjoyed the little back room that you have back there, where you do have many different types of caterpillars and butterflies, and they're going through this whole process of metamorphosis. Can you explain what you're doing back there?
Yeah, so our education room is a small setup to kind of show people what's eating their plants, which is important for people to understand. I get a lot of questions and comments. Well, there's worms eating my plants. And when we kind of pare it back and figure out, well, what plant are we talking about? And, what does it look like that's eating? And it's usually a caterpillar. Most of the time it could be a moth caterpillar or it's a butterfly and caterpillar. And we start to show them what these things turn into. And I think a lot of times folks don't really make the connection of what's eating their plants turn into either a moth or a butterfly. And I think it's just about it. But people intentionally are planting that in their garden, so they are more in tune with what's going to be eating that plant and expecting it to be eaten versus other plants that are in their landscapes. So it's really about education and also trying to convince people to reduce or eliminate pesticide use, herbicides if possible, as well as fertilizers that are getting into our water systems, and increasing our red tide issues. So it's just about explaining what these butterflies are, why they're important. They, are the canary in the coal mine, so to speak. They're an indicator species telling us with their diminishing populations that there's something wrong with our environment. They're missing host plants, they're missing their habitats, and these are things that are really, really important for their continuation.
So we've only got a couple minutes left, and we do have some more callers with questions, but I know we're not going to get to everyone, and I want to make sure that anybody who wants to be able to figure out information from you or contact you or attend any of the events that you're doing or go to your nursery is able to do that. So could you give us just the information about how to get a hold of you?
Sure. My email is anita@butterflytampa.com. And our website is butterflytampa.com. There's a link for the nursery there and also our foundation. And we're planning to open a conservatory. Hopefully it'll be this year. That's what our goal is. Waiting for a few more I's and T's to be documented on some paperwork. So hopefully that comes through soon. And we'll be able to further the mission and work on getting that going. We've also been focused a lot with the foundation on restoration projects, education, and research throughout our area, and working with university partners and PhD students to help them with their research. So there's a lot of things that we're involved in with regard to butterflies, especially also focusing on native plants for our area.
So we're going to
Little Red Wagon, as you mentioned, coming to our location, Little Red Wagon Native Nurseries in South Tampa on Henderson Boulevard.
Excellent. We're going to take one last call here from Sam from Lakeland. Sam, are you there?
Yes, I am.
You have just
me in.
a little bit of time.
Sure. Butterfly milkweed, I brought home from a nursery, a little bug that multiplies like crazy, little orange, bigger than a ladybug, very small, but they're eating up all of the leaves on all the milkweed plants that I have, so there's none left for the monarchs. What is this bug, and how do I get rid of it? Little orange.
Any ideas, Anita? Little orange bugs eating his milkweed? Is it a milkweed bug? Well, you are here today listening to the Sustainable Living Show. You can join Tanya and Kenny next week at 11 when they talk about biodigesters. Next coming up is Flea with his music show. I want to thank Anita Camacho for being with us today. Thanks to my co-host Tanya, Bill Grace for working the boards, Clark on the phones, and as always, thank you listeners for listening to Sustainable Living on WMNF Tampa.